Your love is the best part, love is the best part. Your love is the best part, love is the best part. Even if it all falls apart, your love is the best part, love is the best part.
We gotta leave in 5 minutes, so you want me to do it or not?
Let me just need a flat.
I mean, my parents are still married to this day. What was passed down to my dad was an intense love for marriage and for their wife. So my grandpa like super loved my grandma. Yeah, so like that was, I mean, if anything, what my parents modeled for me, like on a very basic level without 35,000 stories or this or that, is my dad ridiculously loves my mom. The cool part is that that's what my model was. You fight for family. That's what you fight for, is you fight for mom, dad, brothers, sisters, whether they did something wrong or they didn't do anything wrong, you fight for them. And that was the goal, you know, and 20 some years later of marriage, I don't even know how many years my parents have been married now, I think 40 or 50 million. And like, that's just what was given to us, you know? I think growing up, what I did hear a lot was, I mean, a lot of the fights in my house, there was a lot, Nikki, you know, like my family is very loud and very vocal. And so I don't know if any of that got passed down to me, but they were very loud and very vocal. And what's crazy is that like that was the fighting. Like they would fight and they would yell and they would scream. That's just how they talk to each other. So they get passionate and they just get loud and loud. You would think we were like an Italian family or something. Like they just were loud and it doesn't mean anger. It just was like loud, you know, which was crazy because when we first got married, I learned very quickly that's not very effective for us. Not that
that
it's,
would make me cry.
Yeah, I would like get loud and then you'd like cry and be like, what's the problem? You're mad. I'm not mad, I'm just talking loud. And so it was like, learn, like, okay, so, but that was the model, like loud and you yell and that's how you get your point across, is loud. But I knew that there was a fierce devotion. That part I knew, that you don't give up on this thing, you fight for this thing, even if you're gonna threaten 1,000 times you're getting divorced or you're gonna say a bunch of stuff and be really loud and be really crazy, you don't give up. Same stuff I do today. That's the craziness, you know? I'm just super intense, and so I get louder and louder, and anger is a trigger for me, and I get frustrated pretty easily, and I still try to use my voice to get my point across more than just sitting and being patient and trying to be understanding. Not necessarily the best, and I think I've learned a lot, but that was the model I was given, and so trying to overcome that model was just crazy.
My mom and dad were divorced when I was too young to even remember them ever being together, really. So I was raised by a single mom with, I didn't have any siblings, so it was sort of me and my mom against the world, which in a lot of ways is a cool experience because I was number one in her life. It was just me and her against the world. And I think my mom had such a deep desire in her to find a husband and to make a family for us, because something about just the two of you there's this like embodiment of what family is, and that's just not it. It includes a dad and maybe some other kids. And she had this just desire to create that for us, and she wanted that so bad. And that was passed on to me as well. So from the time I can remember, I had such a desire to be a part of a family. I wanted it so bad, and I wanted to, I like my deepest desire was to be a wife. Like that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a wife. Like I never really had some great goals of going to college and getting educated and going out and taking on the world. And I would see my friends, you know, they'd have these desires to go do these amazing things in the world. And it was just like, gosh, if I could just get married and have kids and be a stay-at-home mom and cook dinner, like to me, that was like the epitome of everything right there. And that's what I wanted. That was it for me. And I remember no, I didn't know it at the time, but I remember being in school and hearing something about it was one of the president's wives speaking, and she said that her husband was her career, and nothing else stuck in all of high school, but that stuck. Like something about hearing that her husband was her career, she was quoted saying, and it just like resonated into my heart. Like that's it. That's what I want. Which not many women really can relate to. It's like, wow, you certainly missed the feminist boat. It left a while ago, you know? But that's what I wanted. I was like, that's it for me. My husband will be my career. There just wasn't a lot of married people in my world, you know? It was like my mom and her boyfriend or whoever it was at the time. And I just didn't really see, outside of watching TV, I didn't see a picture of what a husband and wife looked like. So I would watch Donna Reed and Father Knows Best and all those little shows at night because, you know, no brothers or sisters to play with, so the TV becomes your friend. And I would watch those shows, and that became my ideal. To me, like that, I mean, as a little kid, that's real. Like I can see that on TV, and mom and dad hug and kiss when they walk in the door, and they're always happy, and they don't fight, and they don't yell, they talk kind to one another, and their kids are like always neatly pressed, and mommy makes cookies after school. And it was just so idealized to me that that's what I wanted.
To me, it's interesting because I feel like I'm learning, I guess in the midst of that, it's making me have to relearn how to love you correctly. Our expectation going into marriage was super different because of those backgrounds, because fairy tale to you meant something completely different to you than it meant to me.
Right.
You know, where for me, because of that, the idealized fairy tale thing was this huge, like, it's just gonna be hugely romantic. You're gonna love me you're gonna want me all the time. You're gonna tell me how great I am, and you're gonna like, it's just gonna be, you're so gonna just doubt all over me, and this is gonna happen, and this is what it's gonna look like. It's like, it's just gonna be very dramatic all the time. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, it's like, you know.
And I wanted it to be practical.
And you wanted it to be super practical and consistent, right, and like mapped out, which is like
the opposite.
Polar opposite of like the sporadic, spontaneous,
right,
who cares? We're going here today, you know, compared to like, I wanna know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I mean, because that was because I would have said same thing, like Cinderella, Prince Charming, but that would have been a totally different thing for me.
It differently.
That saying that same phrase would have meant something completely different to me.
So we're 19, we start dating. We actually didn't date very long. I think we were engaged within 6 months and married within a year.
Yeah, I think at that time though, it was like,
we knew, you know, it's like, if we're gonna date, let's get married.
I think we actually had that conversation.
So 6 months later, we get engaged and we are going to be married. And, you know, I'm planning a wedding and all this exciting stuff. And how do I say? So what was going on at that point?
Try not to hurt my feelings.
Well, yeah, kind of, and kind of forget how to say it.
I mean, you can just say it exactly. I was a jerk.
Well, no, that's,
it's just for real.
No, I mean, yes, no, but okay. So we're engaged and we're getting married, and I would say it was probably invitations had been sent, like we were getting married, and maybe 2 weeks before we got married. It was because I think it was about 2 weeks before we got married, and all of a sudden I started thinking, you know, this is not something I'm taking lightly, the fact that I'm getting married. This is it forever. Like the weight of it kind of hit me, and I started to think, wow, there's some red flags here. Like there's red flags. Like he has a temper. I don't know. I expected when we were 2 weeks before we were getting married that there would be angel dust or something. I mean, I don't know, like what's supposed to be happening. I'm not feeling like Cinderella yet. Like I just started questioning it. And as clearly as ever, the Lord has spoke to me, and he says, you're not marrying a man, you're marrying a calling. And bam, that thing I had heard in high school of that president's wife who says, you know, my husband was my calling, or was my career, hit me, and it was like, oh, this is it. I felt just really strong in that moment that this was like my calling in life. Like this was more than just a marriage. Like this is a calling. Like I am marrying Jake and I will be his wife, and I will never ever will I ever, God, I lay this before you, I will never stand in the way of Jake and you. And I will never ever stand in the way of his calling to you. And I mean, I like took that on and I felt it strong. Like that was almost like my gift to God. Like I'm going to do this as a gift to you, Lord. Like I knew he had a calling, and I knew that there was something big on his life. Like it felt heavy and weighty to me. And so I went into our marriage very much knowing that this was my calling, and that this is what I was going to give to God. I was going to give to God my position as a wife in this man's life, to allow him to fulfill every dream and every calling on his heart, and anything that God had ever, laid down for him to do. Like I would be there to support it and make it happen at any cost.
It was super intense because we planted a church at 19. So I've been in full-time ministry straight out of high school. Like I went into not just kind of full-time ministry, I kind of came back to the church at 18, and I planted a church with a friend at 19, 20. So I'm like, I don't know any different. This is it. Like to me, church and God, they're the same thing. This is what I'm doing. Calling, God, ministry, it's all one package. At that time, it wasn't like Nikki got necessarily a fair deal, because all of that was married, and marriage was a part of that, not the focus of that. It was just all intense.
Right away, I can say that there was immediately like honeymoon, like something, this is like, I feel like we should just be closer, or I don't know even how to define closer, but it feels like you're off, in your head somewhere, probably thinking about building strategy and what your worship set's gonna look like, and
it is not good. It was not. And
I'm like trying to create this like Cinderella moment for myself, and it was just sort of like we just were like not hitting it, at all. It was not good. We just weren't connecting.
Even above all the other stuff, junk. Everybody brings junk into marriage. Everybody brings their pictures and all this stuff into marriage, but in ministry, it's just so different. And the first lie I feel like that we received that distorted a whole lot of stuff is the fact that ministry and God are the same thing, and that everything else submits, marriage and everything submits to the calling and the thing that you're doing. And that lie, I didn't know it was a lie at the time. I didn't have any idea. I just thought it was God. So in being this intense, I'm being this intense towards God, not that intense to hurt Nikki, but the intensity of like, I'm doing this thing and it is God. And that is like, that's where, that was the first lie that I at that time for years, that was the lie for years. And even on our honeymoon, you could see it, and the first years of our marriage, that was the first major conflict that I wouldn't have even said was a conflict, because I didn't know that wasn't true, or that's what I believed, or, you know what I'm saying? That was just the model. That's just, Nick, I'm serving God. Like, what's your deal? Like, I'm doing this thing. Isn't it so awesome? And I wouldn't have even said it in those words at that time, but in my brain, that was the actions I was taking and running over our relationship in about a billion different ways.
And really what it was is there was no presence. It's like I never felt Jake was present. We kind of fumbled that through having 3 kids, and moving churches and planting a prayer house. And I would say there'd probably be this like fight every 3 to 6 months. There'd be this fight of like, I'm not feeling connected, and him saying, what do you want me to do? Like he was always great at giving presents, and he'd send the flowers, and he'd do all the things that of course all my girlfriends would think, wow, gosh, you're so lucky. And then the harder part was crazy. The harder part was then here I'm watching him on a Sunday lead worship, or in at a church, or give a sermon, and honestly, like oh, that's who I married. I married this man who's so talented and loves Jesus. Like, never once could I ever doubt the fact that he loved Jesus. And I knew because he loved Jesus that he did love me. Like, I knew he loved me even though he wasn't able to show it. And I knew that God was doing...
Well, show it in ways that you felt it to be true. That's the difference. That has to be said, because it wasn't that... Because I think that's where even healing came from a while later, is like the reality that I wasn't not showing love. It's just I didn't understand how to show you love, which is completely different.
So the part that gets really tricky in your head is I'm watching this man on stage, and I'm watching like people be so touched, and they're meeting the Lord, and it's beautiful. And this is what I signed up for. Like, I signed up for this. I mean, that's what you want in God, like to watch people be touched by him and to be married to the man who's just really like bringing Jesus to so many people, and it's what you sign up for. But then you're at home and you're dying because you're not experiencing that. You know, like you're watching other people be touched, and you're watching him love on the body of Christ, and you're watching him love Jesus in a way that's just so amazing and beautiful. But you're sitting home at 10:30 on a Saturday night with your kids asleep because your husband's out ministering to people, and you're dying. And I slowly died for 7 years that way. And there were moments that were great, and there were moments that sucked, and there were all those things in between that happen in life. But when you take this aspect of God is ministry and you combine them and you're married to it, there's something it does in your heart, not only in your relationship with your husband, but in your relationship with God. Because now, like, God and ministry and my husband are so intertangled that when I'm dying inside, but alone by myself as he's out, and he comes home and there's this amazing story of a healing or of someone being touched or a salvation, it somehow gets twisted to be a stab against you. It gets to a dark place. And I was there for a long time. And I would say that fast forward 7 years later, and Jake is on the road a lot, and I got to a place where I can say that I was holding on to not having a nervous breakdown, like by my little fingers, going like, I'm not going to have a nervous breakdown. I don't really feel the presence of God in my life right now. In fact, I kind of feel like God set me up a little bit. Like I really feel set up because I went into this going like, I'm going to sacrifice this for you, Lord, and I'll never get in the way of this man, and I'm going to offer our marriage and all this stuff up to you. But yet that somehow like really stabbed me in the back. And here I am bleeding, and nobody seems to care at all, because an interesting thing happens when your husband is this anointed guy that everyone wants to be around. There's a way that people almost want to kind of shove you to the side, because you kind of become that wall that's like keeping them from touching your husband or getting around him, and then, you know, getting to him, and then you going and telling your little pity story about how, you know, you're not feeling so loved when you get to be married to him is just like not well accepted. And there's not many people who want to hear that, because most people are looking at you going, wow, I wish that was my life. I'm so jealous, you know? And there's not a lot of outlets to talk to people at that point. And so that left me at a place where I really felt like, well, I got to figure this out for myself, because I have 3 kids here. I'm not leaving him. No man will ever love my 3 kids the way this man does. I have no choice but to stay here and to continue the journey that I was on. So I'm going to rededicate myself to what I did when I got married, which is I will be a good wife and I will be a good mother. And if the price of that is death inside, that's okay. I will die inside. That's fine. So that I can continue to fulfill the promise I made to God to be a good wife and the promise I made to these 3 kids. So I can do that. He was away on a trip for an extended period of time, and it was almost like something in my head clicked. This place where it's like, no, I really can do this. We can be married and I can put this on and I can be happy, the doty little wife when he comes home, and when he leaves, and I'll just make it to be a little happy wife and until he's on his next trip. And quite honest, he's traveling a lot now. So this works out great. And then when he's gone, I'll live my life. I'm not going to have an affair and I'm not going to, do anything like that. But that will be where my life takes place. That will be where I'm like fulfilled when he's gone. And it kind of worked. It really did. He comes home from a trip. He was only going to be home for 24 hours. And then he was going to fly to Chicago to play at the All-State Arena with Jesus Culture. And I was going to fly to meet him there. And really it was like, he'd been gone for a long period of time, which normally would have been when he came home, like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. And really I was thinking, God, I don't want him to come home. Like, how am I going to do this 24 hours? Like, things are so great. I've got myself in a really good emotional place. How am I going to do this next 24 hours? And so he comes home and we stumble through 24 hours. So I think he kind of left knowing things aren't right, but that's okay. We're going to catch up again in Chicago. We'll kind of work it out there. And I fly to Chicago just in time to walk in the doors to see him get on stage.
Well, right before that, we found, I ran into Chris Valentin, and I didn't know he was going to be there. We had no idea, and we'd connected with him a few times. At this point, we'd connected with him a couple times just to touch base, and he was super good about touching base with us and marriage and family, and just a couple conversations with Chris. He'd been super sweet to us, loved Nikki. And so I said, hey, if you're here, can we get Nikki's coming into town, can we get breakfast the next morning? So we play that, so Nikki makes it just in time to see us. We play in front of 15,000 people, and in the midst of that, I remember the Lord told me when I was 18 at a Baptist church, when our youth pastor, said, write down your mission statement, wrote down, you'll sing the songs, you write the songs the whole world will sing. And I'm like, I played my guitar for all of 8 months at that time. So it was like, that's kind of a big word, and we don't even really believe in words. And so it was kind of like a big deal. And then I'm standing on this stage going like, this is it. Like, this is what I was like made for. And going, this is kind of crazy. The next morning, we go meet with Chris. It was supposed to be like a 45-minute breakfast, like hang out with Chris. I'm like, sweet, because I knew things didn't go well. So I'm like, we can talk a little bit. It'd be awesome. And so 6 hours later, like we were still hanging out with Chris. And when we went up to his hotel room, he moved meetings with important people to just be with us. And in the midst of that, Nikki felt, because Chris is a dad, and so it was like Chris just being a father figure, and Nikki not having that and never feeling safe, and finally being with a man that she feels safe and feels like, well, I can just say exactly how I feel, just like let everything she was really feeling, all the stuff that she had experienced over the last 7 years before that, just her heart and the brokenness, and in the midst of it, it was just her saying like, I'm done. Not with marriage, like we could stay married, but it's just not, this is not happening. Like, this is not working. This is not really a marriage, so it doesn't really matter if I keep putting on the show, because it's not really a marriage anyway. And at one point she was like, you go change the world, I'll take care of the kids, we'll be fine. And I'm like, and in the midst of that, I'm like, Because all these things she had said over the course of 7 years, it's not like she hadn't said this stuff. It's not like she's like, I've just been silent and now I'm not gonna be silent anymore. It's not necessarily Nikki's style. And so it was like very much like all these things I had heard in small chunks, but I had no tools. Like I didn't know what to do with them. So what are you supposed to do when, you know, somebody hands you blueprints to a house that you're supposed to build and you have no idea how to build it? You don't know where to start, you know? Oh, let me hand you a screwdriver and now you got to build a whole house. Congratulations, knock yourself out. And it's like, well, I don't really know what to do with this thing. And so it was really like hearing stuff that I'd heard, but like, I don't know how to explain it except for like the veil was like just torn. Where all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's what you're saying.
Even if it all falls apart, your love is the best part, love is the best part.